In a socially distanced world, Design United is an optimistic digital platform for collaborative design and connection. Design United was created in March 2020 during a period of intense lockdown and quarantine measures within the region. The aim behind Design United was to create an optimistic space for regional dialogue, connections, collaborations, and opportunities for young regional designers and design practices. A much-needed network of support and peer mentorship during these uncertain times. Talented young designers and design studios working on design innovation with an approach that is relevant to our South Asian region have been invited to be a part of the platform. We also encourage design students from the region to share their work, be involved in the dialogue, and to be an active part of Design United. Design United, most of all, believes in creating a community of designers and design knowledge that is largely contextual, with focus on contributing to the environment and our community. Design United believes greatly in a spirit of collaboration and idea exchange. Welcome to Design United's 39th Design Conversation, a conversation with two talented design firms that work on collaborations, straddling across countries and continents. We have PUR Architecture based in Sri Lanka and Sydney, and ROOH Studio based in India, Finland, and Ireland. I'm Varuna Shashidhar, founder principal of a regional landscape practice, VSLA, based in Bengaluru. I'm supported by my wonderful Design United and VSLE team in this endeavor, along with Claywork Spaces. Clayworks creates flexible co-work spaces that focuses on productivity and sustainability. They also offer complete work-from-home solutions. With this background to Design United, let's move to the much anticipated presentation and conversation. It's a delight to introduce and welcome architects Ruwani and Pulasthi from Architecture PUR, Sydney, Sri Lanka. We're also very pleased to invite architects Shreyansh and Bret Mahon of ROOH Studio. Pulasthi Vijayakun and architect Ruwani Guruge have been together, engaged in an evolving process of thinking, creating, and making. They both have over 15 years experience in architecture, and they're currently based in Sydney, working across a network of collaborations in Sydney and Sri Lanka. Pulasthi is currently the design director for DG5. Architecture PUR is a platform to question and reimagine the most ordinary of spaces, functions, and things. Each project is an opportunity to create a unique narrative through curiously interwoven ideas, spaces, gestures, materiality, and detailing. Their approach is inclusive, experimental, and most of all, working during these challenging times, resilient and resourceful. Welcome to Ruwani, Pulasthi, and PUR Architecture. I would also like to take this opportunity to welcome ROOH Studio. ROOH Studio was established in 2020 and is an Indo-European collective of creative individuals focused on thoughtful design solution with an intent to address the geographical and social issues faced by our industry. The studio is currently working on several projects in India and Europe. ROOH Studio finds that their cultural and geographic diversity as a team gives them a critical and an analytical edge as part of their design process when working across different cultural settings. ROOH Studio comprises of Shreyansh and Bret Mahon, who look for stories in people and places and believe that architecture is a tool for social change. Welcome to Design Conversation, Shreyansh and Bret. With this, we would now like to invite Architecture PUR, Pulasthi and Ruwani to please share their design journey with us. Thank you.
Today we've got we are PUR architecture, and today we've got a little bit of detail about our practice and our design approach, and then leading to some in detail case studies of some selected projects. And about the practice, yeah, we are a boutique design practice based in Sydney and Colombo, and I wouldn't elaborate on this one because it's already talked about. So I just want to emphasize that we have a lot of emphasis, a lot of weight on the idea work that we do, the work that happens before the real physical work begins, real drawing and drafting and sketching begins, the conceptual idea work. We put a lot of value on that in our practice. And we have a commitment to sustainability, and for us, sustainability is not just the numbers, not just ticking the boxes. We work in our, the way we work is we do a lot of passive design strategies in our designs, and then we use a very inclusive process, including the clients and all the parties involved in a project, digging deep, getting their ideas, getting their requirements and incorporating them in the process. And we are very conscious about our social and ecological impact of our projects, and promote generic, adaptable design solutions rather than specific ones, so that if your circumstances change in a in few years time, still you can adapt the designs and it won't be redundant. And we are a very resourceful and resilient practice in all our operations. We've been together, Pulasthi and myself, we've been together for more than 15 years, and we work with people that we know. We worked with, have very good relationships with, lifelong relationships, and who share the same passion and commitment to design and architecture. This includes the people that we work with as well as people that we work for. And as Varna mentioned, Pulasthi is the design director for DG5, a Sri Lankan firm doing a lot of good work in Sri Lanka. Yeah, so architecture didn't happen first. It was the other things, other passions before. Like for me as a child, I was a painter, and this is something that I painted probably 25 years ago. And I was a very quiet child sitting in a corner, painting and drawing for hours and hours and hours. So I think now when I think about it, I think being an architect, I'm doing the same thing, like drawing, and even before drawing, getting the ideas, composing it all in my head, telling stories, getting the characters, the ingredients together, composing and activating drama, like in space making and in architecture. So it's very similar to my childhood habit. And for Pulasthi, his drawings are very different to mine. He's coming from a very extroverted and socially focused role in a very large extended family. So his role, and also a very artistic family. So this background of him has prepared him for his role in architecture as well. So in our practice, we do a lot of drawings, a lot of doodling, a lot of sketching, and I feel that it's all coming from, it's all an extension from our childhood habits, childhood passions. And these drawings, I feel, are a bit different to what we used to do as painters, but they are a bit more meaningful now, has a bit more depth now, and has a different dimension. And this is how we organize our thoughts in architecture, in space, in creating things. And this is how we communicate. This is how we draw out the ideas from inside, the visions, the dreaming onto the paper and lay it out. This is how we communicate now. This is how we design now. And we do other things like random things like writing short stories and try to act them, try to film them, and making abstract models to explore spatial ideas, and then making models. We've always been making models and then photographing them and exploring communication through models. And this is some of our uni work. And we do also design furniture, some of the sketches and the process, some of the furniture that we designed. And so I would go through briefly through a few random projects to show our design approach, how we approach design in general in our studio. We use a lot of logic. We use a very logical approach to design. So this one is called Warehouse, and it's a suburban house, small suburban house in Colombo. And here we used a lot of why nots and what ifs, and we did a lot of things which generally this house in the residential design people don't do. And we did that with a lot of logic to back it up. And then we communicated it with the client, and client's understanding, and with the client's understanding and approval. So here the site, and then that's the building footprint. And what we did was we create 3 podium volumes, and these 3 podium volumes contain the these 3 podium volumes contain the sleeping and service areas of the house, the bathrooms, laundry, the sleeping areas. And then we created a big roof on top, which creates a volume, a field of space. And those 3 pavilions in the upper level becomes all the social spaces of the house, including the kitchen. So in a party, when you have a big crowd, you can really connect the whole space together, or few people visiting, or watching a movie, have a drop down screen, or just the 3 of the family members of that house having a quiet meal in the kitchen, while all the bedrooms and sleeping areas, the private areas, are tucked away underneath in the ground level. So this is a very different approach. But yes, we communicated this and talked about this with the client, and with their approval. So and then the roof is held up by all these ornamental tree-like columns, and they look beautiful, but they are the structure which is holding up the roof. And that sort of integrated approach to architecture is what we like to do in our studio, integrating structure and the aesthetics. So this is another project, and this is the view from our site. It's in the hill country of Sri Lanka, Haliala, for those who know, but it's just away from Colombo in the hill country. And this is our site. So it's been cut away with these backhoes, and then this was our site. It's a beautiful tea estate. And our task was to design a function hall, and we wanted to create a big volume of space and give it a bit of ornament, bit of uplifting, so that the function hall becomes a space that you can celebrate things in, that bring in that spirit. So this is ceiling frescoes from a traditional temple in Sri Lanka. In those cave temples, they used to paint this sort of floral motifs on the ceiling, and they were called the Uduviana, which means a special sort of a ceiling. And inspired by that, we created a Uduviana, a sort of a celebrated ceiling, which incorporates our structure as well as the ceiling, as well as the aesthetics in the ceiling. And this was the result. So that's another view of that. And also we like to participate in competitions. I think that really opens up and let us explore our ideas, test our ideas when you're doing a competition. And this is a competition entry that we did in 2010 for the Future High Rise competition. And here we created a high rise, which is not the normal high rise, not the normal what we see, what we know, but we created uh, several pedestrian ramps starting from several significant streets of the city, coming to a nodal point and spiraling upwards, creating a vertical volume of space. And this is for the street vendors of Sri Lanka. So their streets were created in a vertical volume. That's what we did. And this is the part of the city, the length of the pavements that these vendors are occupying. And then we culminated all that into 7 different ramps, starting from 7 different locations. And we vertically extruded it up, creating a vertical volume. So it's a very different high rise for a very different purpose. So we like doing that sort of experimentation, like experimenting and exploring the ideas, new ideas for preconceived building typologies. This is another competition we did in 2015, Sustainable Headquarters for Sustainable Energy Authority. We didn't win this one, but still it's a nice project to include, I thought. So as the Sustainable Energy Authority, they wanted their building to be be an example of what sustainability. And we started off with the facade. We created a modulated tapering self-shading facade going around the building. And then rather than designing one block of square building, we tapered the edges, and then we created a courtyard, open volume in the middle with the tapering, with all the sides, the facades tapering. And that is the result. So this diagram, ESD diagram, shows all the operations, how this building is functioning, how the cross ventilation is working, how we are getting light from the courtyard in the middle, and how we are creating a central space in the middle with trees and social interactions, and how the filtered light is coming into the building. All of these things with one integrated solution. This is the site, and we placed two blocks of building facing the shorter sides facing east and west for better orientation, and circulate the services on the western side to block the excess heat gain. And this is a lift-free building, so all the pedestrian circulation, the staircases, connecting bridge, and the pedestrian ramp to frame the courtyard. And then on the rooftop, we put a slab over, and then a lot of skylights. That's the aerial view. So that's the Sri Lankan Parliament here, and we are here. That's the courtyard building, the main social space, which is feeding into the interiors of the building, bringing in light and ventilation and creating a big social space in there. And that's the facade system, which is a modular modular facade, which we can select and choose the modules and materiality to adapt. So with that, I will go into some projects. With that, I will go into some projects in detail. We got 3 projects today: house in house, and big tree, small plants, and the CMC office building. House in house is probably some of you have seen this image. It's a suburban house in Colombo, and that's the site, a rectilinear site where we created a rectilinear block with a barn-shaped roof, and then putting an extrusion through that. The idea was to create a tunnel through from here to the other side, connecting the front garden to the rear garden, and putting some skylights through east facing. And these are actually very important to creating 2 verandas at the back and the rear, and deeply recessing the glass facades. It's a very important decision that we took, and then putting the plants through to have the continuation of the garden through the building. And these are some study sketches. And in the plan, we just had a bare site with 2 coconut trees, and then we ended up planting 24 trees, and then internally we ended up planting 6 trees. And then the zoning of the plan is all the living and the service areas on one wing, and then all the main living spaces on the other wing, which is a double height. So on the upper level, you have the sleeping and family areas on one wing, and a double height. So in section, and the long section showing the extra height at the back for the living area, and some pictures to the main living tunnel. And this is a very interesting diagram. This is showing all the external facades of the house, all the 4 facades and the roof here. So you can see that western facade has no opening or not a single window in it. And all the small windows that we've got, very small windows on the eastern side to generate air circulation, cross ventilation. And then main source of light is the 5 skylights on the roof. And then we've got very recessed glass windows in here and in here. So that's the strategy, which is keeping this house conditioned and controlled inside, keeping it cool and glare free. So this diagram showing the interaction which is happening between 2 levels from the main living volume, and cross ventilation promoted by the skylights. And that big ceiling volume that we have is really helping to keep the house insulated. The greenery inside as well as outside, and the skylights. The way the skylights are working is because of its angle. The west side, we don't have any opening at all, but the skylights, because of its angle, the midday, the solar, the midday, the hot sun is not coming in. It's always filtered, and it's always the soft light coming through. And some of the way and when the sun is moving, you can see the shadows moving as well, animating the whole space. Shadows moving, and that's the skylight. Some more pictures. That's one of the verandas. And that's when we built it, just as soon as we finished the house, the small plants. And this was taken about 4 years ago. Now it's a full jungle over there. And this is some of the pictures of the veranda. And big trees, small plants. That one is full of trees as well. So these pictures were taken in 2014 when we first went to the site. The tree canopies and slender trunks this really inspired us to create something with slender, with the canopy, and to maintain the character of the site, to create something with a big canopy and then slender columns, slender trees. So we explored the ideas and we created a veranda which is in an elevated level and which gives you the experience of the tree canopies. So this is the cross section of through the site, and uh, the main living space up here, the main veranda at the level of the tree canopies. So that's where the veranda is. And with a site planning, so we had a relatively larger site in here, but the idea was to concentrate the development so that we retain more of the garden area. So we went vertically, and also we located the house at the uh, right at the corner of the site, with only space for a small uh, only space for a service pathway. That way we retain most of the site for enjoying. And in the ground floor, normally ground floors need a lot of things, so we let the ground floor to have all the things, but main living area we located on the level one whole floor dedicated for living area, uh, living living, and then to the full length of the living floor we got a veranda. So when you open up the doors, open up the sliding windows, it whole thing becomes one big space. And then we got the upper level, the topmost level, which is acting like one big roof hovering over the whole house, held up by these slender columns. And this is the veranda, so you can see it's at the canopy level. You're sitting in the living room looking out at the tree canopies and the breeze going across. And it's a very good thing to have the cross ventilation and breeze in the tropical climate. So this veranda is a very nice place to sit in. More pictures of the veranda and the bedrooms, more bedrooms. So these are the sliding doors opening into the veranda entrance. Yeah, so we designed the joinery and the furniture as well in this house. So this is the living area. And we are going to the CMC office building. This is the last project I'm presenting, and this is a competition winning entry in 2014. Um, so it was we entered the competition to design an office building for the Colombo Municipal Council, which is this building, which is looking like the White House, which is here. And our site is this double triangular site at the back of the council building. And this big, huge space here is a park. That's this park. So the site is characterized by one of the main considerations was the iconic prominent council building, and then the big greenery in front of it. And then all this area is the random low-rise, densely packed urban fabric. So we looked at the typologies for office building typologies, the veranda type, the arcade type, or the more modern box with awnings stuck onto it. And then soon we realized that this site needs something bit more than that. So we went ahead with the box, the modern interpretation, and then we took some of the space up and put them there, creating this profile. And this profile has the same floor area as the box, but that profile is got some attributes which is really helping the brief. Got a lot more space in the ground floor for people and for more landscaping and self-shading. and protection from rain, more space on the rooftop for solar panels, rain collection. And so what we ended up doing is a veranda with tall columns, two double-story height columns with lot of trees in the ground floor and lot of space for people to hang around, because this is a public building and people need a lot of space. A lot of people come here. This is the council building and they need space to hang around. So it's very pleasurable to have a space like this. And in the big picture, that's the council, old council, and then with its arcade here, and then the veranda we created here, the landscaping, this is the through site link. And it's really creating and talking to each other and creating this nice atmosphere and a public space outside. So this is in plan, that's the through site link with all the landscaping and verandas, and it's really melting together in the site and providing all this space for casual waiting and hanging around for the people. So the ground floor, as you go up, the floor levels become larger, and the uppermost level is the largest, and roof hovers over that, creating this stepping facade. And then you can see that we've got these slender columns, which is talking to the traditional columns of the existing building, and then this space is coming alive while we got all these office spaces inside. And the stepping facade of the council, the two-site link. And this is the street elevation, and you can see that all these buildings in the context, the masonry details, the grill work, which inspired us to go with this palette, and all that breeze blocks in the council building as well, so promoting ventilation. So we went for a recessed glazed skin with the perforated concrete screen in front, which is proven to be a very helpful thing to keep the building cool and internally creating beautiful shadows internally. And some of the images of the veranda and some of the old and the new talking to each other, linking together, with another view of the veranda volume. And this is, I really like this image. It really shows two aspects of Colombo, the low-rise buildings on this side, and the high-rise, more ambitious Colombo, the colonial buildings and the more modern buildings, and showing that Colombo, what sort of a diverse city Colombo is. And a very dynamic view with a bird at the right at the tip of the facade of the through side link. And we initially took this volume off so that we could give more focused and framed views of the council building as a gesture of respect to the old building. And and it's really coming alive in the night with the lights on, and screen is coming alive. And this is, I think this is my last slide, the old and the new together. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ruwani, for sharing your wonderful design journey with Pulasthi through your architectural practice. Such an exciting range of projects, drawings, ways of thinking and approaching works that really features your architectural inquiry in Sri Lanka. We wish you the very best, and we thank you so much for sharing your work.
Thank you, Varna. Thank you for everyone for listening and joining us.
I would now like to request Bret and Shreyansh from ROOH Studio to please share their work.
Yes, I just want to say thank you very much for that, Ruwani. That was really beautiful. I really loved how you described your process, and also like the sort of just how you came about all those projects. It was really nice to understand your thought process.
Thank you, PUR Architecture, for your amazing work. It's really inspirational for us to learn from you guys. And thank you, Design United, for having us and giving us an opportunity to share our work. Because I think dialogue is a very important thing in architecture. And unless we have this discourse, we don't evolve as architects and as designers. So I'm here to talk about ROOH Studio along with my friend Bret. So ROOH Studio, we started this in 2020. We are just a group of friends who had a different perspective about architecture. So this is our beautiful team. And we are all located, as you can see, in different parts of the world and working very remotely right now, thanks to the pandemic. And we first met a couple of years ago while we were running workshop. And ROOH Studio started off seriously this year in Switzerland, where the four of us met, and we thought that we should do something about our thoughts and give it a collective name. And that's how ROOH Studio started to begin.
Yeah, it really started through kind of a conversation of friends. We all met through various sort of student bodies of architecture, be it EASA, which was the European Assembly of Student Architects, or NASA India, and yeah, we met and we became friends and kind of shared a lot of similar thoughts on architecture and where we saw architecture, where our voice kind of where we wanted to go with it. And I guess for the 3 years in the lead up to starting ROOH Studio or establishing ROOH Studio or giving it a name as such, we were all kind of really involved in running workshops at various events. You can see here on the map the sort of locations of these workshops. I mean, this shows a handful of them, but there was maybe a few more that we never, that I haven't included here, but they kind of all sort of spoke the same language of one-to-one building or a social aspect around architecture. And really this was kind of the start of ROOH, and a lot of our thoughts and concepts kind of began in this early stage of working through different means of creating social architecture. So yeah, then in early 2020, I guess, we started this momentum from all the workshops we had been running kind of started building up, and we got inquiries for potential projects and more sort of self-led projects that we wanted to sort of see through. And it kind of spurred us on to kind of just take that leap and be like, we're putting a name to this, and we really want to continue collaborating together. So we named ourselves ROOH Studio, and we took that leap. And then obviously the pandemic happened like right at that point. And I guess that gave us a lot of time for reflection as well. Things at the start kind of slowed down a little bit, and it gave us a kind of time to really reflect on why we were starting the practice and who we wanted to be. And over that period, we started getting work and we continued working together. And over the past 10 months, it's been an exciting process of really kind of figuring out who we are as a studio and where we want to go, and working on some really nice projects together. So we're gonna talk you through maybe two of the workshops that were kind of a real catalyst for ROOH Studio, and then move on to one or two projects that we're currently working on. Level Up, this was a project we done maybe 3 years ago, and it was in Rijeka in Croatia, which is a portside city, and with a lot of post-industrial cities in Europe, there's this tendency to disregard the sort of industrial heritage of the city, and kind of see it as something that isn't valuable, or something that should just be knocked down and kind of replaced with something new and shiny. And this kind of is at the core of a lot of our thought process behind architecture, is that we started off building quite small interventions and always focused around the social aspects of architecture and reusing and adapting spaces. And so this project, we kind of wanted to create a focal point, and kind of show that these buildings can be used, so that there's a life still left and a value still left in industrial heritage. So over the space of 2 weeks, there was an event to be held in this expo building, an event which held 600 architecture students living, sleeping, partying together here. And that kind of spurred us on to create a project that would become a frontage, a project that would have a dialogue with the city beyond, that kind of turning its back to the sort of industrial buildings of this area, and to show that these buildings could be used. So Level Up was essentially an event space, a hangout space, a social space at the front of this building. The inside of the building was to be used by multiple organizations over the next 2 years in the lead up to cultural capital in Rijeka, and we wanted to create a pavilion out the front that was kind of a frontage to this, and a social space. It slowly developed into almost this extended staircase of the city, that was a hangout spot that led up to an event platform. And we were kind of conscious of what we wanted, what sort of materials we wanted to use, and we wanted to try and be as sort of be able to use the materials again, or have this idea of reuse. And so we sort of started developing this idea around using scaffolding, which could be hired and dismantled, and then timber, as simple as just timber insets, which our timber was sourced from the local sort of timber merchant, and all the sort of materials and budget behind this whole project came through self-funding, not so much self-funding, but finding the money for this project, calling sponsors, finding people who wanted to give us materials. All the vegetation and planting was donated as well. So it was a very much a self-built project, and this is just kind of the 2 weeks we spent building the building building the project was with 22 participants, and you can see they all come from different backgrounds. And this is really key to us whenever we were setting up the workshop, is that we wanted everyone not to know each other and everyone to kind of come from different backgrounds. That over the 2 weeks we slept, ate, partied, and built together, and a lot of the sort of working out of the details we left to be figured out on site. I mean, we all worked together and learned from each other's skills to be able to build this. And we kind of became a family for them 2 weeks. And yeah, which is a really, really inspiring sort of project that really taught us a lot about how we could build something, and raise awareness, and kind of also that we didn't need to necessarily, we could be proactive about finding projects ourselves, and proactive about finding the sort of money or that sort of aspect of it, and also learn how to sort of self-build. So this is the final images of it, and you can see it just as kind of became this structure that would be used by the city. Subsequently, it became part of the cultural capital of Rijeka, which was lasted over a few months, which was this whole area became an event space, and the structure was held for multiple events, kind of yoga, cinema nights. And it really became a hangout spot. It's still there, maybe needs a bit more TLC and they're looking to revamp it up a little bit more. But apparently it has become a real focal point for the youth in the area, a place for them to hang out and sort of a place away from the major city or from prying eyes, I guess. And this kind of shows that backdrop to it, that the city beyond and the usage, that's people sleeping overnight on it and watching a movie. Yeah.
So heritage was something which was very neglected, and suddenly this structure acted as a catalyst to get all the youth over there. So the building which they neglected for so long actually became a lab where they would party, drink the beer, watch the movies, and it automatically turned into a cultural hotspot and a place for ideas to exchange and things like that. And the beauty of this is this can be totally dismantled and can be put up somewhere else in the city, some other heritage building probably, which needs attention, and it can travel across the world probably. So yeah, that was Level Up. Second Skin. So this is one of our projects which is still in a development stage and it's very close to our hearts. So as architects, we had this problem that we had a lot of thoughts and we did not have a place to vent it out. And so we would try to create our own projects and we would try to find out and ask the questions, because the problem with the practice is most of the clients won't ask the right questions for us to provide an answer with the right building. So we thought that let's create a project out of Second Skin. Second Skin is basically a project which wants to give a second chance to the unintended tourists of our time. When I say unintended tourists, it means all the people who are homeless, who are traveling, who do not have a place to stay because of maybe the economical turmoil, the refugees, and so on and so forth. And even a normal traveler traveling around. So while I was going around Delhi studying the homeless people, I realized that the piece of fabric was something which was common with all of them, that they would like put the fabric on the roadside and have their lunch over there. They sleep on the same fabric. And that made me question that is housing, which is one of the biggest problems in the world right now. 1.150 million people do not have adequate housing. So we thought that maybe a piece of cloth can solve all the housing problems. That was the hypothesis of this project. And we thought that when we are building with a piece of cloth, it needed to be something simple so that it can be used everywhere else. So it was important to have the right kind of joinery. So we, along with our friend Anuj, who has this product called Button Masala, where he uses buttons for joinery and stitching clothes. So we understood that maybe everyone who's on an escape may not have access to a stitching machine and things like that. So what if they can create their own joinery easily using basic materials? So we use buttons and rubber bands to create the basic joinery unit of our structure and see how it would develop. And we did various case studies to see how they'll work off. One of the important case studies were the refugees. So the Mediterranean has become one of the world's biggest graveyards, where people from the Asian countries, which are torn by war, trying to escape into Europe, and most of them die. So this is one of our participants, Nida. She's from Turkey. And we discussed this with her, and she told us that they are sold life jackets from Turkey, which are very expensive. And half of them, they don't even work in the sea. And people just drown and die. So we thought we would create a life jacket as a garment which people can wear when they're trying to escape. And this entire life jacket was actually created out of waste water bottles, rubber bands, and fabric. And this is something which is easily available, and this is something for which you don't need to source and buy stuff because they are already in a very bad state financially and economically. And this, as you can see, is our prototype which we are testing, and you won't die when you're wearing this life jacket. You can swim across the ocean and it'll keep you safe. And this was the prototyping. But the beauty of Second Skin is it's not just a garment. It becomes more. That's my role our role as an architect, that how does it transform? So the same fabric would actually open up and transform into a tent. And this simple fabric would give these people who are trying to find a secure life an opportunity or a transition to find shelter or to find home or to find, just something to wear. Another such project was to have a carbon positive traveler. While we used to travel a lot and realized that we are messing up the world when you're traveling, and we thought that we should have a positive impact. So this is a garment which we merged with a local Bengali fabric called the gamcha. And we, instead of using buttons as a method of joinery, we actually use seeds and damp cotton, which would become the basic unit of our joinery. That's with the same method tied in rubber bands. And once you're done traveling, you can actually just drop this jacket in the forest, and the idea was that it'll lead to growing more trees around it, and in an attempt to neutralize the carbon footprint which we are creating as travelers. And again, second skin is not just about fashion or about clothing, it's also about how it can turn into a simple shelter. So we were experimenting on how it can turn into a shed, and it can open up into a different structure. Another such prototype where we were thinking of a traveler who does not like carrying heavy suitcases, and we thought we'll create a bag out of it. And the bag, so this bag, you can store all your stuff when you're traveling, and once you're done traveling, you can just open it up, and it'll easily transform into a tent where you can sleep. So this was basically made for hitchhikers and people who want to go trekking. So the way we look at architecture is not just buildings, it's beyond, and it also needs to answer something which the world is facing, some social problem. And second skin was an attempt. So this is still in the research stage, and we hopefully would launch it soon next year so that the people can use it. And this project is something which is an anti-product. We don't aim to launch it as a product for people to buy. It will be a free source, open source technology which will be updated, and people can obviously use it as and when they require. The next project I would like to talk about is Kaswa Tamo. So this is the first project which we were doing collectively as ROOH, all of us, and one of our first paid projects. And this was during the pandemic. So when the pandemic hit, we realized that something as basic as food is a major issue in our cities. That even though there are 570 million farmers in this world, but the amount of people they need to feed is way more. It's 7 billion people. And we felt that this ratio was not balancing. And in the cities during the pandemic, all the supply chains were broken down and food became a basic problem. Then we questioned ourselves that why should we grow our food thousands of kilometers away from our homes? And why can't we just use the cities and the disused spaces as a place for farming? So we thought of creating this pavilion, which in a way replicates the life cycle of a plant. And it is something very simple, but it's not just for farming. It becomes a place where people can have their lunch. This is for the post-pandemic situation where people can eat together and have their breakfast. They can hang out, they can watch a movie. This is a prototype which we designed. It was in the Helsinki Museum in Finland. And we thought that this could be a place for the newer generation to understand more about farming, and this prototype could be replicated into different parts and zones of the city. And this is the final product which we ended up designing. This was all made during the pandemic by our teammates over there and our friends. And as you can see, the furniture and everything was designed as an extension to the structure, which transforms as per the need and usage of the time, and the courtyard can keep on transforming in its use. And these tables would act as places for people to sit and dine. And we would also have events where people would come and farm, like they would get their own plug their own tomatoes and get their own bread and make salads and have this salad over there. And it was something like a food source for the city, which was free and which was maintained by the city and by the people of the city. That people would come, have their own lettuce, have their salad, and just go off. And of course, the place needs to double up. It cannot just be a farm, it would be redundant in a city. So it became a cultural hotspot, which was used to educate students and the young people about the impacts of and the importance of urban farming and how it can be the future of our cities.
Yeah.
And the best part of this project is now dismantled because the harvest is done in Finland right now, and you cannot grow any more plants because it's very cold. And it's dismantled and dropped off at an NGO, and it will again be rebuilt every year. And the beauty of it is it has now been developed into a product in Finland, and it is going to be replicated in different parts of the city as an urban intervention throughout Helsinki. Brett, do you want to add something to this?
No, I think you described that quite well. Yeah, that's the real beauty of this was that, I mean, to dismantle it was a party, a harvest party where all the locals came and took all the produce home, and they dismantled the structure at the same time. And that's something that we kind of really take to heart with things that we do, is the afterlife of what we produce. Is really important that these structures, even if they're temporary, that they have a life afterwards and they don't just become more wastage. Yeah.
So the next project is what we'd like to call birdhouse. So as you can see, we love to build around nature, and this is a project in Calcutta. It was a residential extension to one of the houses. And so our process of doing architecture is we are very clingy architects. We'll sit in your houses for some time. We'll want to explore how you live and want to understand how you use the building, because we feel building is an extension to your body and it helps you live better. So this context was very beautiful. It had almond trees on both sides, and one of the residents was a photographer, and he would click pictures of beautiful birds which you'd see around the structure. So our entire intention of this house was to invite the birds into your house and not restrict them on both sides of the houses. And thus we thought of creating many punctures and courtyards, because we feel nature is the best building material. It's something which doesn't get old, it keeps on transforming, it's dynamic. And thus we build this birdhouse, which is actually a series of connecting courtyards. And it helps the photographer to click pictures from his sofa, from his dining room, probably every place. And this is the image of the courtyards. As you can see, it's totally open for allowing the birds to enter, and the landscaping is done in a way that it invites more birds, more species of birds across. And this is the simple plan. As you can see, we have minimized the bedrooms because we feel that bedrooms are a waste of space because that's a space where you spend the least amount of time. So we, in a way, removed all the bedrooms and converted into transformable spaces for people to live and interact with nature in a more open way. You can see the image of the birdhouse. This is the section. As you can see how all the spaces are interlinked and it doesn't feel like a flat. That's how the generic building was to start off with. And now this project is under planning. And as you can see, these are the courtyards which connect, and there's ample amount of natural light to it. So you probably won't even need to switch on lights when during the day, because it's so open and nice, and it allows the wind to blow through the rooms and the spaces.
Yeah, I guess a lot of this came from kind of this idea of cross ventilation as well, and kind of recessed courtyards that have quite a deep sort of depth to them, in a sense that you get light that floods in from above. Also, in terms of materiality, we've been started into the detailed design of this project, and we're kind of the mindset that we really wanted to pare back the materials to kind of be as honest as they can, and really let the spaces speak more, or let the flow of movement or the flow of air have a bigger presence in the building form itself. Yeah. And this is maybe a kind of another image of how we envision it to be once it's built. And the lining of each of these sort of courtyards is intended to incorporate sort of planters and different species, to allow for different species of birds. As Sonny said, this area, because of where it's surrounded by, there's a unique opportunity to have wildlife in the city centre. Yeah. So this kind of leads us on to kind of the final project that we'll quickly talk about. And there's kind of a theme that follows a lot of our work so far to date, is like this idea of nature, or this idea of looking outwards, as well as creating sort of a simplicity in form, or a simplicity in the plan, and spaces, using cross ventilation and lighting and shadow as the main tools of exploring the space. And this is a project, micro living within the nature. It's five cabin typologies that we've been developing with a Finnish timber construction company. It kind of came about through a conversation with a carpenter and engineer in Finland, a mutual connection to Jonas, one of our partners. And it's a guy called Jonathan, and he's a master carpenter and trained in France, in the sort of French Alps. And his background is very much, he started a company 2 years ago to create kind of unique accommodation in nature, one-off houses. It's kind of small scale micro living, but more so he was doing a lot of one-offs, and we had a conversation with him about maybe designing a bunch of prototypes that we could prefabricate and sell, and come to market. So yeah, we kind of were looking at 5 different forms, and kind of each one would have a different sort of footprint, a different size, or a kind of a different aspect to them. And at the heart of each one is this idea of compact living and fuse outwards to the surroundings. And this is maybe an image of one of them. All 5 of them have kind of progressed over the past 6 months to a stage where we should be ready in the next 3 months to begin marketing them. They're being produced in a factory in Finland, Jonathan's factory, and with his collaborators in Poland as well. So they should be ready to be sold in around the sort of north region of Europe. And I guess this image here shows kind of some of the thought processes of this, allowing for sheltered space and allowing overhangs that create a sense of shelter in the wilderness, and a sense of home as well. Just kind of in the Finnish context, it's always necessary to have a sauna. So this option here allows for a sauna and indoor sort of space that is outdoors as well. And kind of that these cabins have each a load is so compact, they allow for different usage, in such a small space, that by introducing a mezzanine, that you can have a space that has a roof light above it, that you can look at the stars in the evening. By having a secluded bedroom at the back, there's a kind of getaway space, or a sort of cave-like space that you can retreat into if you don't want to be part of the social gathering in the main sort of living space. And the same goes with the second sort of option, is that it's based around a central sort of plan that allows for a living space and a sleeping space with shelving and sort of bench by a window. But it was kind of trying to promote this micro living, or this like condensed way of living, that you don't really need as much space as what people ask for. I mean, we find a lot that whenever you work with clients is that they always want more, or always want more area or bigger footprints, and it's, you can do a lot with minimal intervention or minimal space, you know, requirements. And there's maybe more of an argument to not automatically jump to building double the floor area just because you want it. And that's a question that we kind of keep asking ourselves, even whenever we're doing bigger projects than these, is it necessary, or how do we convince someone that they don't need all this extra space whenever there's only maybe 2 people living in a house that they ask for 300 square meters? Yeah, and that's kind of, yeah, just want to say thank you for inviting us to talk. I mean, for us, this is a process that we've only really started out, and we're really excited to see where we go with this. And that really, as young architects, we all have a voice, and there should be a voice for in the profession, for people who are wanting to kind of do their own thing, or try to build something. Yes, Sonny, do you want to maybe end?
I think that clearly sums up our intention. We build what we want to, and then we figure out how to build that. So that has been our process in ROOH for so long, that we think if this is a problem, we have to solve it. We try to solve it, and then we try to find sponsors who's going to pay us to make those things. And we are trying to take architecture off the client-centric way of doing things, but we build our own briefs. But yeah, we also do client-centric stuff, but mostly it's to feel all these.
There's always a way of questioning as well, and a dialogue with the client that we like to have. You know, it's a difficult one, and it's one that we're kind of finding our feet with, but it's something that we feel is really important, is to question why we're doing something, or what outcome do we want in the process. So thank you very much. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Shreyansh and Bret, for sharing your work and approach with ROOH, your deep concerns for the basic human needs, food, shelter, environment, and approaching architecture through almost an innovative, playful lens to create architecture that is useful and widely accessible. We wish you the very best with your journey with ROOH. With this, we would like to open the session for conversation. I would also like to take this opportunity to introduce and welcome our moderators for today's conversation. Architect Dinesh Krishna, who works with Mindspace Architects Bengaluru. Krishna is an architect, is a graduate from RV College of Architecture. His previous experiences as an intern at Sameep Padora Associates, and also as a designer at Gensler. Welcome, Krishna. Bhumika, who is our second moderator for today's conversation, is an architecture student from Wadiyar Center for Architecture. Bhumika has an interest in architectural writing, journalism, and sociology. Bhumika is also part of our Design United team. Welcome to Design Conversation, Bhumika. With this, we request the audience to please share your questions for our speakers. Thank you.
Thank you, Varna. Thank you to the two architects for your wonderful presentation that gave us an insight into your practice philosophies. And that brings us to the questions that we have put together for this session, where we would like to know about your respective approaches to practice. So first question is for architect Ruwani. So PUR Architecture has designed projects at various scales, from office buildings to furniture and joinery details. Is there a change in design process when the scale of the project changes?
Yeah. Thanks, Bhumika, and also thanks to the thanks to ROOH Studio for sharing their beautiful work, their fresh, youthful approach to a new dimension in architecture, taking architecture away from the drawing board and the computer and bringing it out into nature. Yes, to answer your question, I think that's something that I think sometimes about. I think it's the same approach, and probably designing little things like joinery and kitchen details, kitchen joinery or furniture is harder than designing buildings, because there's a lot to think about, and in a scale which is even the 1 millimeter matters. So we find ourselves, when we are designing furniture, working with the measuring tape, measuring every millimeter, every working in a very small scale. So we are working with very small dimensions, whereas in architecture is more like bigger dimensions that we are working with. And so there is a difference, but then we have to put the same amount, if not more, for designing furniture and designing joinery.
That answers the question. Thank you. Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
Okay, so my question is to ROOH Studio. So as we saw, so most of your projects are micro interventions for a larger, a social context or a problem. So how did this thought process start, or how did you start approaching these kind of issues?
So mainly for us, architecture was not just about making buildings for rich clients. It was also about a social responsibility. Ever since architecture college, we are always told that architects are an important part of the society, you're important stakeholders, blah, blah, blah. But I've never seen most of the architects do anything for the people. The South Asian context requires a lot of things to be done for the people who cannot afford to pay architects. And we at ROOH Studio were actually trying to find our own briefs, trying to find out own problems and try to provide a solution for that. And projects like Second Skin and all, even Kaswatama, which is actually made in Europe, but it can be prototyped anywhere. So the entire idea was to, pay away our social responsibility as architects, as professionals. Because I think as architects, we can design better compared to the organic things. And we think that we should take up projects which do not pay us as well at times. And that's why even at ROOH Studio, we have this philosophy that every year we invest a certain amount of time for pro bono projects for NGOs who cannot afford architects, so that we can actually make a difference at the grassroots levels.
Well,
But yeah, we also
yeah, I think also we also come back. I guess that's the nice thing about starting the practice, is that all of us kind of have different ideas as well. Like for me, it also, a lot of our projects came about this way because we are so young. I mean, we get these smaller interventions, and it's only now that we're starting to get into the realm of proper buildings, or like having clients that that there is a monetary value to things, and we're starting to practice that you have to have a balance between working and making a living. And there is a real sense that architecture is so undervalued, and we feel that we also need to create awareness of that, and by working on smaller scale and working with people who can't afford architecture as such, or creating your own briefs, there's a way of showcasing architecture to people who necessarily wouldn't. That's not to say we don't want to make money, because every architect needs to make money, and that's the issue, is that it's so undervalued, the profession. Yeah, I hope that answers that.
Yeah, perfect. That does answer my question, and it's very interesting to see that rather than just complaining about the problems we as designers have the power. You're showing that we as designers have the power to change things that's happening around us.
Thank
Yeah,
you. We
perfect.
just a small attempt.
My question is for Studio ROOH. So Studio ROOH was started by a group of young designers and established in the year of 2020. So that's the year when the pandemic broke out. So were there any challenges as a team and were there any challenges that you faced during the time of pandemic and did it have an impact on your designs?
Yeah.
Bret, you can take this one.
Okay, cool. Yeah. I guess for us, we were kind of used to working remotely. I mean, we all come from different spots of the world, and whenever we were doing workshops, there'd always be lead ups of months of working remotely and using video conferences and Slack and other channels. But yes, the pandemic obviously affected our process, you know, but it also gave us time because we kind of really right up to the pandemic, we'd really built ourselves up to start something and had this momentum that we thought we could do anything. And then all of a sudden the pandemic happens and it kind of then gives us a chance to really reflect and talk to each other about what do we want out of this. Like, for instance, the last question there where me and Sonny have kind of slightly different utopian views on what architecture is like that's kind of the nice thing is that we can argue with each other in that time and that it really forms the practice, you know. So yeah, I think it really helped us to say that there was a silver lining to this groundedness that the pandemic gave, even though it's an awful situation in the world. But for us, it came at a point where it let us reflect. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it is very interesting how you put across the positive impact of pandemic where you had time to deliberate and discuss amongst yourselves. Thank you for the answer.
My next question is to both the studios. And the question is what's unique about this discussion is both of you are located and you have your presence in multiple countries. So apart from your regional influences on your design, is there something very unique or something specific that you carry across your design?
Yeah, I'll let the ROOH Studio take the question.
Okay. Sonny, do you want to?
Yeah. So for us in ROOH Studio, it's really fun the way we look at architecture because someone who's in Finland, for them, summers is the best thing in the world. And for me, who's from Calcutta, summers are the worst thing that can happen to you. And our discussions are really fun on how we design spaces. But I think something which we all agree on is our responsibility as architects and to create responsible architecture. And even before we started the studio, we actually had a 1 month long session where we would just brainstorm on our ethics. And we actually wrote it down for all of us to remember, like even years across when we probably, maybe, hopefully we get bigger. But we still have that thing to reflect upon that this is what we started. Because we have generally seen that during the journey, people deviate from their ethics and the principles. And at ROOH, we all agree on similar ethic and similar responsibility. So we have also committed to organizations like the Architects Declare in Finland and stuff like that, which restricts our material palette that we cannot use certain building materials in Finland when we are designing it. But I think that's the sacrifice we have to make, that this generation's Le Corbusier won't make concrete buildings, but they will maybe make it out of CLT. Who knows? But that's a new learning for us.
I guess I'd like to add that, like, that's also the interesting thing is that our ethics also so can be, we can get in arguments amongst ourselves on like, which really helps in the process is that someone say, for instance, my viewpoint from growing up in Ireland is completely different to the viewpoint of Sonny or Saga in India, and the idea of materials and the sustainability aspect of materials really changes per context. Europe is at a point where everyone's sort of using CLT and concrete is being shamed upon, whereas I guess in the Indian context, concrete is at its heyday still. It's being used for everything, and there's this kind of balance of what is sustainable in economical terms as well as sort of the core sustainability. So yeah, I guess it throws up a lot of interesting questions amongst us, is that we all come from different backgrounds or thought processes.
Great, that's great. Architect Ruwani, do you have anything to add on to
Yeah,
this?
just to add, yeah, it's very interesting how ROOH Studio is approaching this multi-satellite architecture studio. And for us, yes, it has been a very big plus having living here in Sydney and practicing doing a lot of work in Sri Lanka. And I think we are getting a bit of both worlds, and we are maintaining a very resilient as well as a resourceful practice uh, because of the time zones, because of the resources. We are mindful of everything, and we are learning from here, applying it in Sri Lanka, and that sort of cross pollination as well. So I think yes, it's a big plus for us as well, doing this through two different time zones, to different countries. Yes.
Yeah, that's pretty interesting, and how both of you have your own takes on this particular question. So,
Moving on, yeah, my question is for both the studios. Projects from both the studios have a very strong sense of materiality and language. So, what are the factors the studio has taken into consideration while choosing the material in each project and still having a hold over the language?
Yeah. Okay. Um, so it is all depending on the material, is all depending on the circumstances of the project. Sometimes we come up with a whole lot of questions, and as the answer, it's pointing out to a certain material, like what happened in our big tree, small house project. We chose concrete because we thought that that project demanded something which would age timelessly, and then create that sort of beautiful patina over the years. And then client demanded a fuss-free maintenance, easy maintenance material. So all the requirements of the project pointed towards that material, and that's where it started. And material was the hero of the project as well, because of the material we used, some things were possible to do in that project. And if you take the other project, the office building, we started off with the material in the mind as a solution, the concrete screen. So we created the project having the concrete screen in mind. So that was the solution that we came up with right at the beginning. So yes, to have a office building, create an office building in Colombo, we need some sort of way to negotiate with the outside, and we will use a concrete scheme because it's very common thing, something which is very practical, used in Colombo, used in the tropical climates to do the same thing. So we used it, we adopted it. So materiality is, it doesn't really come from somewhere else, but it's all in the process. It sometimes it points to the material. Yeah. Does that
I
answer?
agree with Ms. Ruwani that material is something which is very contextual. Like Bret was saying, that wood is considered as a very carbon neutral material in Europe. But whenever you look at wood in the South Indian context, it is something which is actually really bad because it's harmful. The forestation is not very planned. And even if you're getting wood from outside, it has a carbon footprint. And so we look at material not just from its sustainability point, from the decomposition and the impacts of it, but we also look at the journey it's making around the world. Because mostly in architecture, we never calculate that if something is coming all the way from France, that's more harmful than using concrete, which is grown locally, maybe 100 kilometers away from your city. So that is something which we keep in mind in our practice. And it's obviously the local context which narrates our material palette a lot.
Yeah, that actually kind of answers the question, and also it's put across very well from both the studios. I think Krishna has one last question from our side.
Yeah, I think coming back to the pandemic, right? So we all have had our share of it has impacted us in different ways. So do either of you have you come across any issues as such, and would you like to explore going ahead in the direction? I think ROOH Studio might already have a few plans regarding this.
Yeah, so the fun thing about pandemic was right before the pandemic started, we were actually planning to work together for a few months in India, and one of our partners had already arrived in India, and he ran away catching the last flight to Finland, which was a blessing for us because we got eventually more projects in Finland. And poor Bret could never make it to India. He had to cancel all his flight tickets. But as he said that we are already used to working very remotely, so it worked for us. And but the pandemic gave rise to projects like Kaswatamo, which made us question about the way we grow food and the way we live. So as a studio, the pandemic has helped us reflect more about architecture because for us, our process is asking questions to ourselves, and it left us with a lot of questions. So I guess we can keep on answering that in the due course of our practice eventually and try to solve them.
Architect Ruwani, do you have any plans moving ahead?
Yeah, I think even before the pandemic, we were working online, working remotely, and that has just become the norm now. So people have more regard. People know that this is a real thing. This is something that people really can do. Like before, it was like, can you really do that? Can you really run architecture practice remotely? Can you really, is that even possible? So that has reinforced for us, and I really hope that things would pick up and things would start moving. And although we are okay in Australia, we are okay in Sydney, but in Sri Lanka, we really hope that things would start rolling, and people would be able to live as because it's okay for the practice, it's okay for the ongoing projects, but then the economic impacts and other social impacts really impacts the projects. And but I think yes, it had made us think like the world economic crisis, and then after that the world architecture changed a lot from making very superfluous ornamental architecture to really think about what you need. And as you also said in the ROOH Studio, Bret and Shreyansh, uh, people have really started to think about what we really need, whether we really do need 300 square feet, 300 square meter house. So like that, people have really started to think about things when something bad happens, and that's when they start to think. So I think even this pandemic, people, it has made people think that we don't need all these things to live. What we need is some basic things. So that kind of thought process is there. So I really hope that people would remember these things, and people would remember what our fundamental basic needs to make us happy, and that thought process, that thinking would trickle down to architecture as well, and people would think differently about the resources, about the way we use things, and about our needs in a more deeper way. Yes, that's my hope for moving forward.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Architect Ruwani. And I think we've reached the end of our session. And thank you so much for both the studios. And you've been like a very big inspiration to all of us. And I hand it over to Varna.
Thanks.
Design United greatly believes in the spirit of collaboration, which is reflected deeply in both Studio PUR and ROOH's work. Careful ways of thinking, making fresh approach to work. Thank you so much, Ruwani, Pulasthi, Shreyansh, Bret, for sharing your wonderful work and approaches with us. Our thanks also to the moderators, Krishna and Bhumika, for engaging our speakers in such a thought-provoking dialogue. Also to our audience for joining us, DU, VSLA, Clayworks team. Thank you very much and have a great weekend.